leading authentically. So today we're having Mr. Kachi, and he is joining us from Georgia, USA. He's a Nigerian, so without wasting too much of his time, we're just going to add him up right away, and then we will begin. And this is my new look. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, let's start. Okay, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. So we're going to be adding him up right now, and then we will begin. Okay. So today's topic is going to be leading with sincerity of purpose, and it's a very important topic for me. I believe it's very important for young leaders as well. So we're going to be adding up right now. We'll begin. So Mr. Kachi is a leadership lecturer coach in USA University of Georgia, and he will be speaking. Yes, he just joined us now. So okay, thanks so much, sir, for joining. So I'm going to be adding up right now, and then we will begin. Okay, let's see. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, sir. Hello, sir. Sir.
Hi, Miracle.
Yes, please. Good. I think it's afternoon there. So good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful for accepting my invitation. Thank you so much. Really, really grateful. Thank you so much. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so without wasting too much of our time, we want to go straight up to the point. And the topic is leading with sincerity of purpose. And Mr. Kachi is actually a lecturer, a leadership lecturer coach, I think. Yeah. So, and he is going to speak on this topic. And it's a very important topic for me. And I believe every young person should as well watch this now and after now. So I'm going to open the floor and give to Mr. Kachi, and then he will take over from here. Thanks so much, sir.
Oh, for sure. So initially, I was wondering, I was going to ask you, Miracle, if this was going to be like a question answer session, but I guess you want me to just speak to the topic. Is that the plan?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And then I will ask the question.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
this is very impromptu, but
I can hear you.
get involved in the work of leadership without having a clear purpose. Or even when they do, they're not sincere about why they're getting involved in the work. So in my experience, a lot of young people are active in Nigeria. I like to use Nigeria as the context. So I remember when I started my leadership journey in Nigeria, I was leading a non-profit organization, set up to raise awareness about depression and support women who become depressed after childbirth. Yeah. And so what I find is that, a lot of young people like me then, what I found is a lot of young people like me then were running non-profit organizations too. But, the reason why they started these non-profit organizations were not genuine. Okay, so a non-profit organization, but there's no sincerity behind why they start these non-profit organizations. And so what starts to happen is that people begin to pose as though they are genuinely interested in leading change. But at the end of the day, they're only seeking their own personal interest. And so when we think about where our country is presently, it begs the question, like, how come we have so many non-profit organizations and young leaders who are trying to create change in the country, and yet there's no real change happening in the country, yeah? And so even though we know that our government is dropping the ball and our leaders at that governmental level are not doing what they should be doing, you ask the question, how come the young people in the country who are posing as though they are interested in leading change are not able to make a dent, make any impact? And I think that it comes down to a lack of sincerity of purpose, that these young people are not very sincere about why they are getting involved in this space. So when you're not sincere about your why, you're not sincere about why you're getting involved in the work, it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get swayed. It's easy to lose focus. And we see this happen all the time. So people start. So for example, a young man starts a non-profit organization and he says he wants to increase access to education for young children. and then somebody makes him an offer to do something else, gives him like a ton
Mm.
of money to do something else. And the next day you see him saying he's doing a campaign on malaria. So
Mm.
sincerity of purpose. It's just going wherever the money is. And so if you do that, you would not make any lasting impact in the society and in your community. So having clarity of purpose is the number one thing for any young person who is curious about getting involved in some leadership work. Is like, what's your purpose? Are you clear about what you want to accomplish? And in understanding what your purpose is asking yourself that big why questions, like why does this matter to me? Why is this important for me? What change do I want to see? And then what resources do I need to channel into this work to see the change that I want to see? Who are the stakeholders I should be engaging? Have clarity about what you need to do. You'd have clarity about who you should bring on board to do the work. So if you have no clarity about what you want to do, and you have no clarity about who should be on board with you to do this work, then you'll be missing the point, you'll be missing the mark. So it's important that young people understand too that they alone cannot solve the problems.
Mm.
Once they identify what their purpose is, they understand their why. The next step is to understand who needs to be on the table, who should you be engaging. So once you have clarity about who you should be engaging, there's a necessary humility that's required to actually engage them and bring them on board. So when it comes to leadership, a lot of people think that the leader, the individual leader, is the one who should do all the work to make progress on the challenge. So for example, if I'm passionate about solving issues around depression, then I should be the one to solve all the problems. Yeah, that's often the delusion. But leadership requires collaborative efforts. It requires the efforts of not just
Mm.
individual leader, but all the people who have a stake in the problem too. So the question is, who has a stake in this matter? So if, for example, again, I want to solve the problem of depression, who has a stake in the problem? You have young people who are depressed, who have a stake. You have medical doctors in Nigeria who have a stake. You have the government who have a stake. So identifying all these possible potential stakeholders and then sitting down to say, how do we systematically engage the stakeholders? That's the work of leadership. Leadership is not about carrying a title and saying you're the person who's behind an organization. Leadership is actually engaging the necessary people who you should be engaging to make progress. So, one, you gain clarity about your purpose, why the work matters to you. Second, you get clarity about who should be on the table. Who are the stakeholders who should be engaged. Third, you actually do the work of engaging them. The big pitfall that a lot of young people get into when it comes to like engaging stakeholders, that they tend to engage the stakeholders that they think are important. And this is
Mm.
sometimes the stakeholders who have some kind of power or influence. So for example, if I'm a young leader in Lagos who's trying to make progress on mental health challenges, yeah, I might be tempted to only engage government,
Yeah.
or engage, the medical doctors or the psychiatrists in the country. But there are people who might be impacted by the problem who may not have the same power as the government or the doctors who might have, good ideas on how we can make progress on the challenge. So engaging members of communities, non-profit organizations who are involved in that work, other community members who might not have the same power, but have really high stake in the issue, should be priority for young leaders. Okay, so like I said, when we get clarity of purpose, we get clarity around who should be engaged, we get clarity about how we should go about engaging those ones, and then we get clarity about, um, the power dynamics, that it's not only those who we perceive to be highly influential that should be engaged, but everybody who's concerned or impacted by the challenge we're trying to address, should be engaged. So um, so once we have clarity and we have clarity about who we should engage, we go ahead and do that engagement work, and we enter into the work with a requisite humility. Humility is also important, and this is not something that a lot of young people associate with leadership. When you think about leadership, you think about people who have a larger than life persona, yeah, people who charisma and who are borderline arrogant. That's who we tend to think about as leaders. But to be a successful leader, you need humility, and humility helps you know that one, you alone cannot do it all. It helps you know that, two, you need to share wins when you get wins. Yeah. So if you make progress on a challenge, that it's not just about you, that you alone did not cause that change to happen. It's a function of collective work that everyone has done. So humility is important. And it ties into being sincere about your purpose and sincere about why you're doing the work that you're doing. It's no new thing for us as Nigerians that when a young person becomes successful in the community, and becomes very impactful as a leader, they tend to cut off from the people who helped them to get there. And again, it's sincerity, because if you're really passionate about the cause and passionate about your community, you would not be looking to, be separate from the people who got you there in the first place. It's why many of our politicians are not accessible. A young man becomes a local government chairman tomorrow. The next thing, you have no access to him. Yeah, a young man becomes, say, a councillor, even a councillor. The next minute, sincerity as to why they got involved in the work in the first place. It's all about the power. It's all about the money, and that's why we're seeing no progress in the country today, because there's just no about why people are getting involved in the work. If there's one thing I'll share with a lot of young people is that, be sincere, be genuinely interested in creating change, be genuinely inspired to do so, be clear about your why, who needs to be on the table with you. It's not just about you. Only you cannot do it. So be clear about who you should be bringing on board. Have a strategy for engaging not just the most influential people, but those who are also mostly impacted by the challenge. They should be on board. Ensure that it's a collaborative process. Be humble as you enter into the space, and hold to, not just sway, to not just go wherever the money is. Do even when the money is not there. That's why it's work. If we all go where the money is, then nobody's going to do the hard work. The reason why the country is not forward is that no one is willing to do the hard work. Like, leadership is risky, it's difficult, we need to hold to purpose if we are to make real impact.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Kachi. I'm really, really grateful, honestly grateful. And so this one goes straight to the question section. And then when I first spoke to you about this, and you gave me the topic, and it resonated with me because I felt this was the same issue we're actually experiencing here. And that was the main reason why we made it the theme for this should be authentic leadership, leading authentically. Because somehow looking at it, we have a whole lot of creative leaders in the nation, even in Africa and West Africa as a whole. We have a lot of creative leaders in the nation, and I'm wondering what's still stopping change from still having its full potential in us. And I discovered that it's the fact that we are not actually being authentic, which has to do with still being not sincere with this. So how will a young person come to a place where they learn to be sincere with their purpose? So maybe they've seen a public figure who's taught them what leadership truly means. I don't want to use an example, but let me just try and use this. So probably we see a leader who is always not accessible, and then it takes advantage of people to get to power. And then it's still good. It's good to the people. He helps people, gives people money and everything. And people still see such person as a good leader. And then young people begin to emulate such people. How do young people come to that point where they realize that this is not true leadership? How can they actually, instead of get their own way out of it, out of that system?
So I think the first thing we all need to do is to do some soul searching, to say, if this leader is actually effective, what's the proof? What's the proof of his effectiveness? Or what's the proof of her effectiveness? Or what's the proof of their effectiveness? So we tend to think that a leader who comes into a community and shares money is a good leader. Yeah. So if he comes around and he shares like 500 naira to each person, then he's a good leader. 1,000 naira to each person, they're a good leader. If the person, for some reason shares a bag of rice to the people in the community, and then we complain about the country not progressing. Yeah, we complain about our communities not progressing. So leadership is not a function of short-term wins. Effective leadership is not a function of short-term wins. Just because the person comes into a community and shares money does not make you a successful leader by any sense of the word. real progress. And I think that's where community members need to sit down and say, what does progress look like for us? So if, for example, I grew up in Egbeda, okay, I grew up in Lagos, Egbeda, Lagos, Akwonjo, Lagos. Akwonjo, Lagos has been the same way it's been for the past 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, no progress. Okay, small businesses start up, shops pop up, and then they die. There's no real development. The roads are bad. The roads have been bad, since the last 20 years. There's no way anybody can tell me that a local government, say Alimosho local government chairman, has been doing any work in that community in the last 20 years, whoever has been in that seat. Okay, so because there's been no real sign of progress. There's been no infrastructural development. There's been no job creation. There's been nothing. So even if that person comes into Alimosho tomorrow, Akwonjo tomorrow, and shares money, young people need to realize that it does not make them impactful, because there's no real change happening. So if we don't do that soul searching and determine for ourselves what progress means, we would not be able to hold our leaders accountable. So I think that's the thing about Nigeria. Like, Nigeria always complain about the economy, but we can never really pinpoint what that means. What does that mean? If we say, oh, the economy is bad, what does that mean? You ask the average Nigerian young person who says the economy is bad, and they tell you, the only thing they can tell you is like, oh, the dollar was 1 naira yesterday. I mean, the dollar was 200 naira last year. Now 300 naira. That's the only economic indices that many young Nigerian people have. And so you ask the question then, if this is the only indices for progress for young people, what change would we really see when the same young people get into power? We're not preparing for leadership. And that's why, we continuously get changed by leaders who pose as though they care about the community when they share, 1,000 naira notes to the community members. Because the average Nigerian person really does not know what it takes to, lead the community, or what success might look like for us as a people. So if we don't have to think about what success looks like for us, then there'll be no real progress. And I always use, of course, inflation is a good indices to understand whether or not an economy is doing poorly. But almost every country around the world struggles with inflation. Even the United States of America struggles with inflation. The Nigerian currency is stronger than the Korean currency. South Korea, yeah? Our currency is stronger than their currency. Does that mean that our economy is doing better than South Korea's economy? That's not true. Does that mean that our country is developing better than South Korea? That's not true. So we must begin to move away from this whole, bag of rice was 5 naira yesterday, now bag of rice is 10 naira. That's not the only measure progress. As a people, we need to invest in ourselves and learn about what real economic development looks like, what community development looks like. If we don't do that work, we would never be able to hold our leaders accountable. Okay? For example, we say that for a leader, if we say that unemployment is 30% in Nigeria right now, which is what the numbers are, and we say that for the next 4 years, we want to hold our leaders accountable and say that they must reduce that unemployment rate to, say, 20%. If at the end of 4 years, unemployment rate has not been reduced to 20%, we can then say, yep, we hold this guy accountable. We told you that, your mandate is to reduce unemployment by 10%, and unemployment has not reached 10%, so we would not vote you in the next time. That's holding your leaders accountable. That's having a measurable yardstick to say, this is what success means for us. If we say we want to improve infrastructure in Lagos State to the point where we have no potholes in our roads, at least in the major highways, or we, declutter our roads to the point where we no longer have traffic as terrible as it is now by building new roads and having a walking bus and train system. In the next 8 years, we there, and in that 8 years, the roads are still blocked, the roads are still terrible, there's no infrastructure. We can hold them accountable and say, no, we've not seen any real change, we're not voting you in the next day. So I think the first step is that we need to do that soul searching and have a conversation as a community about what success looks like for us. And if we don't have that conversation about what success looks like for us, we would continue to get by these young people who, these government officials or these politicians who pose as though they're genuinely change and look like they're actually doing something when in truth they're doing nothing at all to move our country or our communities forward.
Wow. Thank you so much. Let me see something. So leadership is not a short-term wins. Thank you so much, Mr. Kachi. So the other question I want to ask, okay, Okay, I think yes, the last should be the last question actually. And this is a question that, I read your profile and I see the track record of things you've achieved, things you've done so far. And right now, one of the reasons why we're having these sections from the bottom of my heart is to change the narrative of this understanding notion people have about leadership. So somehow you go to church every Sunday or every Saturday, and then we're being taught the word of God, and it's constantly renewing the mind. But somehow, when it comes to leadership, we don't have a system where young people are being taught constantly that this is what leadership should mean, and this is what it means. So when someone sees what leadership is not, it is easier to actually detect that this is not a system of leadership. That's why we've been having this constantly well. And it's very nice that this was built out of Nigeria and in Lagos, University of Lagos, where I school, and in fact in Egbeda, where I stay. So the question I want to ask is, what advice would you give to young people with the notion you have about the system of leadership here in Nigeria? What advice? What's your last word for young people in our generation in such a time as this, in Africa and in West Africa as a whole?
So, I mean, there are two ways to learn about leadership genuinely. Yeah, it's one, you educate yourself by reading as much as you can, because like you said, nobody's teaching us how to do this in our schools. It's shameful. I teach at the university here, and it breaks my heart. Some of my students actually joined this call, and it breaks my heart because we spend time here in the US teaching young people how to lead effectively. Yeah, at the undergraduate level, students come into school. First year, second year, by the time they're in the third year, they've taken out these 3 classes in leadership, so they know what leadership is. They know how to hold their systems accountable. They know when the system is failing. They have language to actually analyze things. But I did not take any class in leadership. I schooled in Nigeria. Not take one class in leadership. Okay, nobody's preparing our young people how to lead on how to lead. That's sad. So for a young person, the academic system is not preparing you for leadership. The best way to books get exposed. The best at leadership was true. I think we just lost you, Miracle. Okay, you're back.
Yeah,
I read John Maxwell's books, on leadership, the 101 Principles of Leadership. I read Malcolm Gladwell's books, Outliers, and things like that. I read a ton of leadership books when I was a lot younger, and I still do, even as a professor now at the University of Georgia. I still read a lot of books around leadership. But the other thing you could do is by actually engaging in leadership work, and that might look like volunteering your time with a nonprofit and actually getting involved in your communities and working to create as little as possible change as you can. Okay, so getting involved in leadership work early on is one way to help you develop leadership skills. So people always scrunch their nose or look down on people who get involved in nonprofits. But it's actually one area where you can really learn to lead, because when you work with a nonprofit or you volunteer with a nonprofit, you have no leadership authority. Yeah, you have no formal authority, but yet you're still engaging in leadership. That's where leadership is most difficult, when you have no formal authority at all. Like when you have to influence people to get things done, have no power over them to actually get them to do things, which is what Nigerian leaders do. They leverage their formal authority to get people to do things because of the power they have over them. But you actually learn when you have no authority over people, where you only have to leverage your influence to get them to make progress on challenges. So, and the best place to do that is by volunteering with profits and being engaged in community-based organizations. That's one way to not only just learn how to be a leader, but also exercise leadership, practice leadership. So those are the two things. Those are the two things that I advise young people to do. Read as much as you can. Unfortunately, we have a dying culture of reading where a lot of young people don't read anymore. But reading as much as you can. When I went to NYC, people used to laugh at us then. When I did my youth service after camp, my first Alawi, I bought 4 books. I did not read all of those books, but I did not read them back to back. But those books exposed me to ideas that I still leverage today. So read as many possible books on self-development, books on leadership as you can, and then second, volunteer time with non-profit organizations I would create conditions for you to exercise and practice leadership without any formal authority. That's where you
Mhm.
ask them to lead effectively, and then hopefully someday, our educational system would be to the point where we prioritize the teaching of leadership in our schools, so that we can intend help our young people develop this very, very important capacity. Because everywhere you go in the world today, even in Nigeria, people are looking for individuals who would work, but who would leaders within these organizations. Yeah, people are looking for leadership skills. People are demanding that schools teach young people how to be leaders. Yeah, and so we need to turn our attention to leadership within higher ed, within our academic institutions, to do that intentionally, because you might spend 4 years learning about how to lead effectively. When we come out from
Mhm.
would be more engaged citizens, will be more, and even when we don't have the traditional 9 to 5 opportunities in corporate Nigeria, would be invested in trying to see real change happening in our communities, by being creative with the interventions that we generate, coming up with creative interventions to ensure that our communities, our local communities, are making progress. So if do that, that'll be good for us. But in the interim, like I said, young people should read as many books as they can, and volunteer their time with nonprofit organizations. That's how, nonprofit organization. That's how to actually exercise and develop leadership.
Mhm. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Kachi. So, the last question, which we want to make it easier, so we want to actually have this like a short video to post. So, we're going to go straight up to the point. Is in 5 words or in 10 words, what would you say that leading with sincerity of purpose is? In few words.
It's being honest as to why you are engaging in leadership work. It's, searching your soul and, telling yourself that you're doing this for the right reasons. You're not doing this for fame, for clout. You're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because you're actually passionate about seeing real change happen. You're not doing it for the scholarships or the fellowships that you hope to gain. You're doing it because you are tired of seeing your people struggle, and you have clear ideas about how to make progress. You're not doing this for yourself. You're doing this for the stakeholders, and you're sincerely looking how to engage the stakeholders to bring them on board, because you recognize that leadership is not about one person, the individual. It's about people who have shared purpose and who are working together to ensure that that purpose is achieved. So as long as you keep this in mind, especially if you're doing this with humility, then you're leading with sincerity of purpose. But if you're not, it's probably time for you to do some soul searching, so that you realize you're probably like in the wrong space.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Kachi. So we're gonna let you go now, but I'm really grateful, really, really grateful for having you, honestly. And I wish we could actually have you. I mean, University of Lagos. I wish we could actually have University of Lagos like a bishop and have like young leaders in the ESCO. It's gonna be a great privilege to have like
Let's let,
being.
let's make this happen. I'll be in Nigeria at the end of May, so reach out to me. Let's make
Wow, wow,
um
wow, wow. Thank you
I-
so much.
I'd love to, hold a program at the University of Lagos. Probably that's a way of giving back, because I did my master's at the, so
Wow, wow.
let's
Okay,
that happen at the end of May. I'd definitely be in Nigeria at that time.
okay, okay, okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Kachi.
For
Okay,
sure.
now bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining, everyone. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.